Ladies and gents, boys and girls, what's going on Wednesday, October the 11th, 2023? Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show, and we have got a ton to get into and a ton to discuss here on this Wednesday, this hump day, if you will. I see John Edward, Caleb Thomas, Ethan K, Travi, Brendan, Peyton. What's going on, guys? Appreciate you all tuning in. Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, to be sure your questions are answered there, guys. Of course, on Fridays, we have our Q&A mailbag where we'll take all of your questions, comments, and calls in the first hour. But in the meantime, Monday through Thursday, we take questions periodically throughout the show from the Discord and Super Chats via YouTube. So if you have anything you want to get out there, you want to discuss, also today, I want to shout out a member of the Big Cock Club, Football Frank. This shirt I'm wearing, he actually sent this over to me quite a while ago, and I know it's been a while, Frank. I have not worn it as of yet, but today I felt like why not? We'll go ahead and pull it out here. So I want to say thank you to Football Frank for sending over the merchandise. Jamaica Queens, the Hillside Hurricanes, the fire department up there in Jamaica Queens. So shout out to those guys, and shout out to Football Frank. Appreciate him, like I mentioned. Taking the time, sending this over, and showing love and support to TDC, the Spurs Up Show, everything in between. Yours truly, again, I really do appreciate it. Like I said, guys, jam-packed show here on this Wednesday. In hour number 2, we have our good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South of College Football Uncensored. He will take the time to chat with us. That upcoming at 1:15. And then, of course, in this first hour, it is Wednesday, so of course we continue our deep dive into Gamecocks and Gators on Saturday. We'll do position unit comp, we'll do key matchups, and we'll do our weekly drive around the SEC for Week 7. And guys, a jam-packed slate of games, tons of great football on this weekend in the SEC, and really college football as a whole as well, everywhere from West Coast to East Coast, everywhere in between. But again, guys, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all tuning in. Let me also remind you, the TSUS post-game call-in show presented to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants will take place immediately following South Carolina's game against Florida. I would expect that'll probably air 7 o'clock or so is when the game will most likely end. But again, immediately following the conclusion of the game, we'll go live right here. And it'll be nothing but your calls, your questions, of course, and your just pure reactions to everything that takes place on the field of play, Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium. But again, guys, thank you all so much. Appreciate you all tuning in. With that being said, we will go ahead and dive into everything. As like I mentioned, a jam-packed show counting down the days to kick off. By the way, let me also remind you, we got a big show upcoming. A couple of big shows, by the way, later in this week. We do have J.C. Sherbert. His conversation will air either tomorrow or Friday. And we did a special crossover episode with our good friends over at InAllKindsOfWeather.com, a Florida Gators podcast, a show that I think Gator and Gamecock fans will enjoy. We'll air that right here, and we'll distribute it via podcast form, guys. It's like an hour and a half long conversation. So I will guarantee you we will have a live show go longer than 2 o'clock this week, either Thursday or Friday, or heck, maybe even both, guys. Both of those may go until 3 o'clock just because we're going to be double booked with guests, and we got this great conversation I want you guys to hear with our good friends in allkindsofweather.com. So a jam-packed week of content, guys, as we continue to count down the minutes, count down the moments until we get to Gamecocks and Gators on Saturday afternoon. With that being said, who has the advantage at each position unit when the Gamecocks and Gators do battle on Saturday night? It is time for our weekly position unit comparison for Saturday's game at Willie B. And we will start at the quarterback position. And on the Florida side of things, this was a talking point all throughout the summer because, of course, the Gators were in need of a quarterback after Anthony Richardson was taken in the NFL draft. And you would have thought to yourself, okay, Florida is going to be able to go out there and get a big-time name. I mean, it's still Florida. Although Billy Napier is not Steve Spurrier, they're not quite running the fun and gun. They're not running some sort of air raid system. I think we all thought, okay, Florida should not have a problem landing a quarterback. Well, the Jaden Rashada situation happened with NIL, what have you. They lost out on him. Florida swung and missed on a couple of guys in the transfer portal. And this is a fact. This is not guess. This is fact that we know that Florida struggled in the portal, going after their top targets. They were forced to settle on Wisconsin transfer Graham Mertz. And I was one of the many that almost used Florida, I feel like, guys, this offseason as sort of a punching bag in the sense of Florida might finish 7th behind Vanderbilt. Graham Mertz is the worst quarterback in the SEC, right? I had Graham Mertz 14th in my SEC quarterback power rankings. Admittedly, he has been much, much better than I think anybody gave him credit for, right? Graham Mertz isn't just a complete disaster. He is every bit of a game manager. He is every bit of a facilitator. He is every bit of a distributor of the football. He is not a game changer. He is not a big-time playmaker. He's not going to be a guy that's an all-conference or all-American caliber player. But he has been much better than 14th best in the SEC. That goes without saying. And on the South Carolina side, I think the big question, guys, coming into this one, and of course, we'll talk top storylines on tomorrow's show, but I think the big question going in this one for Spencer Rattler, the last time we saw Spencer Rattler out, that was the first time all season we saw him look like a mere mortal. All season long, he's been wearing the Superman cape, right? He's been doing everything for South Carolina, putting this football team on his back. My question is, do we see Spencer Rattler go back to that out-of-this-world level he was playing at, right? Going 18 for 20 against Mississippi State, 25 for 27 against Furman. Granted, I understand the competition, but still, you look at the UNC game, you look at the Georgia game, the little help he's gotten around him. I think we all agree Spencer Rattler was playing at a level not many other quarterbacks, not just in the SEC, but in college football, were playing at. Or do we see Spencer Rattler become mere mortal yet again? And this is against the Florida Gators defense, by the way, that gave him all sorts of trouble and all sorts of headaches a season ago. With that being said, even with our last memory of Spencer Rattler being on the field, being against Tennessee in that ball game, there's still no way you can look at this matchup and not give the significant nod to the Gamecocks. There's nobody out there who would rather have Graham Mertz than Spencer Rattler, and it's not even up for discussion. And I think that you look at that Tennessee game, more of like it was the perfect storm at night at Neyland, and you look at the body of work for Spencer Rattler, what he's done to this point. One game against Tennessee where everything was going against 7 can't make you forget just how good he has been this season. And again, while Graham Mertz has been better than I think most folks, including yours truly, gave him credit for, Spencer Rattler is head and shoulders above what Graham Mertz is at the quarterback position. So easily we give the nod to the Gamecocks at quarterback. We move to the running back position. And the encouraging thing for South Carolina, guys, is this. Mario Anderson is giving this running game hope. He has, without a doubt, established himself as not just RB1, but I think the workhorse back there that South Carolina desperately needs in the running game. Because, guys, you look at these final 7 games. It's not about, can South Carolina become a 50-50 team, and can South Carolina find a running back to average 150 yards per game, or get them to that point where they average that as a team. The question is, and the question was, could they find a ball carrier that could just get some tough yardage and provide enough semblance of a balance to be 70-30, but that 30% be legitimate in the running game? And I think Mario Anderson gives you that, right? Mario Anderson, not a guy that's going to be a, mention on these short lists of best running backs in the SEC, what have you, but he can be serviceable for South Carolina. Now, beyond Mario Anderson, Where do the answers come at the running back position? I genuinely don't know, guys, because most fans are about sick and tired of seeing Dakereon Joyner tote the rock, as terrible as that sounds to say. Juju McDowell, he's a guy that, I think he can help this football team, but he has to be utilized in really special packages. So I don't know that you could really look at him and say he's a surefire RB2. And then Montavious Braswell, the true freshman, we just haven't seen any of him since the Furman game. So still major, major question marks in that Gamecocks running back room. And then you look at Florida. And guys, this is one of the best running back duos South Carolina is going to see this season, and Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Now, Trevor Etienne did not play last week, so his status is still somewhat up in the air. Talking to the Florida folks we've chatted with, they are expecting him most likely to play, but it's not 100%. But they feel as if Etienne more than likely held out last week for precautionary reasons. They had Vanderbilt, obviously, and they knew the Gamecocks were upcoming. Also, Trayon Webb has been really, really good for them. 2 rushing touchdowns, 6.6 yards per carry. The fact of the matter is this, guys, the Gators have somewhat of a 3-headed monster. At minimum, they've got one of the best 1-2 punches in the SEC when it comes to the running back position with Johnson and Etienne. And for that reason, the Gators get the nod at the running back position. We move to wide receiver. And on the Florida side of things, Ricky Pearsall, the undisputed wide receiver 1 for the Gators, 453 yards receiving. He's been pretty good in his own right. 453, 2 touchdowns, has a long of 50. You might recall that incredible one-handed catch he had in that game. I believe it was against Charlotte. If not Charlotte, it was McNeese. It was one of their FCS opponents, if you will, averaging 75.5 yards per game. So there is no doubt Ricky Pearsall is their go-to guy. The question is, what do they have beyond him? They like Eugene Wilson III a lot, a true freshman, 20 for 168, a touchdown on the year. Caleb Douglas, 11 for 133, a touchdown. But really, guys, you look at their receiving core and their passing game as a whole, it's Ricky Pearsall and then a bunch of question marks, right? And while South Carolina is in somewhat of a similar situation, right? Because it's Xavier Legette and then, who is the wide receiver 2 behind him? Because we know Juice Wells is not going to play on Saturday. So it's Xavier Legette and then, is Amarian Brown going to be 100%? Is it Eddie Lewis? Is it Omega Blake? Do we finally start to see Nick Harbor emerge? So when you compare the wide receiver position with these two teams, it really does come down to the top-end talent and the top-end production. And I think South Carolina's top-end talent and top-end production is better than Florida's. I also like the depth overall more. I think you sort of know more of what you're getting out of guys like Omega Blake, Eddie Lewis, and Amarian Brown than you do guys like Eugene Wilson, Caleb Douglas, and the rest of these Florida wide receivers who are very talented, but most of them are true freshmen. They are unproven. At least guys like Amarian Brown and Eddie Lewis, they've done it at the Power 5 level before. And then you got Nicholas Harbor, Omega Blake behind them as well. And then, guys, again, I would give Xavier Legette the nod over a Ricky Pearsall as good as he has been. So, for all those reasons I mentioned, I do give the Gamecocks the nod at the wide receiver position. It is very, very slight. I was very close to labeling this as a push, but I will give South Carolina the nod when it comes to the wide receiver position. We move to tight ends, and I am really intrigued to see guys come out of the bye week if South Carolina utilizes the tight ends more than they have to this point. You've started to see Trey Knox emerge and come along. I think he's turning into a nice weapon for South Carolina. But where is Joshua Simon? I mean, this is a guy we heard about from local pundits all preseason long, talking about how good he is, how great he is. He's going to be involved. He's such an upgrade from this guy or that guy. And I mean, guys, Joshua Simon's had a few catches, but he's been a non-factor. I mean, he's been practically a non-factor to this point in the season. Do we start to see more Joshua Simon? Do we start to see more Trey Knox involved in this offense? And then you look at Florida, and they just had a tight end emerge, granted against Vandy, but they did have a tight end emerge in Arliss Boardingham, who, coming into last week's game, had just 6 catches on the year and 1 touchdown. And I think only, I'm counting it up here, 38, 43, 51 yards receiving, right? So was a very seldom used tight end going into that game last weekend against Vanderbilt. Guys, against Vandy, 7 catches for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. Arliss Boardingham, a name to keep an eye on, the redshirt freshman out of California, 6'3", 240 pounds. Outside of that, guys, they've got Jonathan Odom, 9 for 75, no touchdowns. And really outside of that, guys, they don't utilize the tight end a ton, or at least they just have not this season. When I look at this position, guys, these are very comparable, but I think there's more proven talent in South Carolina's room than there is in Florida's room. Because you look at Trey Knox. I mean, this is a guy, a multi-year starter in the SEC. You know what you're getting, but you know he's a dependable option at the tight end position. And then Joshua Simon, I don't think it's that he doesn't have the talent. I mean, this guy's had 7 receiving touchdowns last year. Granted, it was at Western Kentucky, but 7 receiving touchdowns last year, but he just has not been utilized. And I think that duo of Trey Knox and Joshua Simon is better than really anything that Florida has at this point. You know, one good game for Arliss Boardingham does not give Florida the nod here, does not solve all their issues at that tight end spot or make all of a sudden the tight end a lethal weapon for the Gators. So for that reason, I do give the Gamecocks the nod at the tight end position with the dynamic duo of Trey Knox, Joshua Simon. And I think you're going to start to see South Carolina utilize those tight ends much, much more beginning this week. We move to the offensive line. And unfortunately, our last memories of South Carolina's offensive line was against the Tennessee Volunteers in a six-sack effort, if I can spit that out. In a 6-sack effort. That is our last memory of the Gamecocks offensive line, starting a pair of freshmen with Big True Babalade and Trovon Bowe. Now, good news is here, as Ja'Kai Moore should return this week and should not put all the pressure on Trovon Bowe in regards to the right guard position, having him just thrust out there against yet another SEC opponent. And so I can't even say it's been a mixed bag for South Carolina's offensive line because, you know, some will look back at Tennessee and say, okay, you ran the ball better, 140 yards. But then you factor in that 75 of that came on 1 carry. And you take that away, and it was a very typical South Carolina rushing performance, guys. 2.4 yards per carry, you know, ran for about 45 yards or so, or like 50 yards in that ball game. Nothing crazy, nothing spectacular. You then look at Florida, and while they have not been great on the offensive line, statistically, they have been much, much better than South Carolina. They've only surrendered 15 sacks as a team, and they have paved the way for a rushing attack that's been pretty potent with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. Guys, I was really, really close to labeling this one as a push because Florida, again, has had their own issues. I think a big boost for the Gators this week, guys. They held out 2 of their top offensive linemen against Vanderbilt, including their center, Kingsley Agukin, which I'm probably messing that last name up, but either way, their starting center, they held him out. You saw him return in that game against Tennessee. He had missed a couple of games, and it made a world of difference against that Tennessee defensive front when he came back for the Gators offensive line. Guys, I cannot in good conscience give South Carolina the nod here when they've been so bad and so abysmal to this point. I mean, guys, South Carolina on the offensive front is on pace to allow 59 sacks this season. 59. Which would by far be a school record. So you look at these 2 units. Florida's got their own issues. They've been makeshift. You'll hear Gator fans talk about how their offensive line has been no good. They've had problems. But it pales in comparison to what South Carolina is dealing with. I mean, South Carolina, this is one of, if not the worst offensive line in the SEC. So with that being said, I give the Gators the nod at the offensive line position. It was close to a push, but until we see a better performance coming out of that Tennessee game and just see this offensive line, I mean, guys, even in their best performance of the season against an SEC foe, the Gamecocks surrendered 4 sacks against Mississippi State. It's just, even when it's good, it seems to be less than stellar for the Gamecocks offensive line. We move to the defensive front. I think a big question this weekend, guys, is what do you get out of the edge position? Jordan Strawn, Jatius Gear, does Drew Tuizama start to come along? Does Brian Thomas Jr. finally make an impact? How about Tyreek Johnson? How about Terrell Dawkins? Where has he been? Then you look at the interior. Tonka Hemingway, Boogie Huntley. Does TJ Sanders continue his hot play, right? He's been much, much better over the last couple of weeks since that Georgia game. Do you see a guy like Nick Barrett? Do you see Elijah Davis finally emerge? But I think there's still a lot of questions when it comes to that Gamecocks defensive front. A defensive front that, listen, by all accounts, they have been much, much better. The statistics prove it. They've been much better against the run. 141 yards per game allowed this season. If you'd have told me that's what South Carolina will be allowing through 5 games in this season, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. You look at Florida on the defensive front, and they overhauled this group over the offseason through the transfer portal, and it is paying off major, major dividends for the Florida Gators. Memphis transfer Cam Jackson in the middle at 6'6", 360 pounds. He has been fantastic for them this season. They've also got 6'5", 435-pound interior defensive lineman Desmond Watson. We all recall this guy had an interception against South Carolina a season ago and proceeded to stiff arm Spencer Rattler. You then look at Tyreek Sapp at 6'3", 275 up front. He's got 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss for them. Guys, you keep going down the list. I mean, it's just great athletes on great athletes. Caleb Banks, the redshirt freshman, 6'6", 320 pounds. They've got size. They've got speed off of the edge. And I think they've just got more top-end talent, guys, than South Carolina. You also look at Princely Umanmielen, which, again, I'm probably messing that name up as well. The junior, 6'5", 255, coming off of the edge. This is a guy that's been an all-SEC caliber player during his time at Florida. 14 total tackles at this point, 4 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. I like the Gators' talent, and I like their production at this point in the season much more than I like what South Carolina puts on the field on a week-in, week-out basis. Now, I know this is a group that got gutted against Kentucky. I totally understand that. But the same way we look at the Kentucky game, you also have to look at Tennessee. You have to look at the rest of the schedule. And you look at basically every other game this season, guys. The Gators have been fantastic defensively at all 3 levels, right? The Kentucky game looks more like the outlier. It looks more like the exception than the rule because Florida has been fantastic. Austin Armstrong, the defensive coordinator, has done a great job with that defense. And I think you've seen them be active against the run. They're not the greatest in the world at rushing the passer. Only 9 sacks to this point this season. And unfortunately, the Gamecocks have a way of making teams like that look really, really good rushing the passer. But either way, guys, I like their size on the interior. I like their talent on the edge. I like it much, much more than what South Carolina presents. For that reason, I do give the Gators the edge at the defensive line position. We move to linebacker, and Florida is led by a pair of really, really good ones. Shamar James, the sophomore out of Mobile, Alabama, 6'1", 230 pounds, leading the Gators with 42 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and a sack. And then Scooby Williams, the redshirt sophomore out of Alabama, 6'2", 230 pounds, 29 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack to his credit as well. That 1-2 punch, that dynamic duo, guys, it's better than anything South Carolina has right now. To be totally honest with you, I think the linebacker position for the Gamecocks is still a bit of an eyesore. It's still a bit of a work in progress. You really could use Mo Kaba right now. Unfortunately, of course, we know out for the season with an injury. I will say this. I think the linebacker position's improving just because you are getting to a point where, and Shane Beamer mentioned this in his media availability this week, where Bam Martin-Scott and Pup Howard are seeing more and more and more reps. And it's taken some of the pressure off of Stone Blanton and Debo Williams. They're not having to go out there and play every single snap. Like that lack of quality depth has really been killing you. So maybe this is the week we start to see Bam Martin Scott, Pup Howard make even more of an impact, and you start to even out those snaps, and you're able to keep guys fresh and rotate guys in, and there not be such a major drop-off from your ones to your twos. But until we see that, guys, I like what Florida has at the linebacker position much more. I think South Carolina still has a ton to prove. I think the Gamecocks just being average at linebacker would be a great step in the right direction. For whatever reason, this has been a problem area for Gamecocks football for quite some time. I don't think that's any different this year. I do give Florida the advantage and the edge at the linebacker position. We move to defensive back. Now, this is probably one that will be highly debated because there's many folks out there who say, Chris, South Carolina secondary isn't as bad as their statistics will show. And South Carolina is a victim of the quarterbacks and the offenses they've played at this point in the season. And listen, you have a valid argument in the sense of South Carolina's first 5 games. It's been a gauntlet in the sense of the quarterbacks you faced and the high-flying passing attacks you faced. Drake May in North Carolina. Need I say more? Carson Beck in Georgia, who, by the way, guys, I don't know if you've checked recently, Carson Beck is on pace to set the single-season passing yards record at the University of Georgia. Will Rogers and Mississippi State, right? And then you got Joe Milton and Tennessee and Josh Heupel in that offensive attack. So, with all that being said, though, you can't give up 311 yards per game passing. You just can't do it. You absolutely cannot do it. And that's exactly what South Carolina has done to this point. Do I think that the Gamecocks are much more talented in the secondary than what they've shown to this point? Yes, I do. Especially Nicky Manwari and DQ Smith in the back end. I think Nickel's still somewhat of a mystery while David Spalding, Nurse is back from injury, and Keenan Nelson Jr. tries to figure things out. And, do they slide DQ Smith down to the nickel spot? They lack quality depth at the safety position. And then I think that, O'Donnell Fortune and Marcellus Dial have been solid, but I don't think they've been great. I do not think they have filled in the shoes of the departed Cam Smith and Darius Rush. You then look at Florida in the secondary, and you talk to Gator folks. This is a unit that's been impacted negatively by Jason Marshall Jr. and his production or lack thereof, not living up to the hype, right? But Jason Marshall Jr., Jaden Hill, Kamari Wilson, all return for the Gators in the secondary. And you look at them guys, they're doing a fantastic job stopping the passing game to this point in the season. I think this is actually one of the most fun to watch matchups in this game on Saturday. It's Florida's pass defense against South Carolina's pass offense because it's good on good, right? Gamecocks averaging over 300 yards per game passing. Florida is averaging giving up just 167 yards per game through the air. And so while, maybe some guys haven't lived up to some sorts of hype, right? You talk to Gator folks. I think Jaden Hill is a really, really good player. Jason Marshall Jr. has got all the talent in the world. For whatever reason, has not been great this season, but he's got all the talent in the world. And again, they've still got Kamari Wilson in the back end. And so you can look on paper and you can say, well, we've got this guy, that guy. Look at the talent. Look what we've done in the secondary years past. But guys, that's not what this comparison is. It's to this point in the season. And so is Florida's secondary as good as what these numbers have shown? I don't know. We're going to find out a lot about that on Saturday because they have not faced a quarterback like Spencer Rattler to this point in the season. But again, this is another scenario where I just cannot in good conscience say, yep, the Gamecocks have the advantage. Because, guys, this secondary has been terrible. They haven't just been bad. They've been terrible. Flat out terrible. And they're much better than what they've shown. But until they show it, all we have to go off of is what we've seen to this point. For that reason, I do give the Gators the nod at the defensive back position. We move to kickers and punters. And guys, I'll tell you this, this is not the Beamer Ball of old that we are all so accustomed to. This is not that. You know, you love to see the fake punt. Obviously, Kai Kroger and Xavier Legette, execute that in the game against Tennessee. I mean, outside of that, you've had the onside kick against UNC, but you haven't really had those big game-changing plays on special teams. So, I say all that to say, like, you look at special teams efficiency ratings or what have you, the fancy numbers. Guys, the Gamecocks are outside of the top 30. Florida's actually ranked higher than South Carolina in special teams efficiency or whatever metrics they use to measure special teams. They're led by punter Jeremy Crenshaw, averaging 48.89 punts or yards per punt this season, 11 punts longer than 50 yards, 5 downed inside the 20, and 4 have been for a fair catch. You then look at their field goal kicking situation. Really interesting. They started out with Adam Mahalik, which was a walk-on. He went 1 for 3 early on in the season. They then transferred over to Trey Smack, who was a scholarship kicker, and he's been perfect ever since. 7 for 7. Also hit a 50-yarder against the Charlotte 49ers, along a 54. That was that 50-yarder I just mentioned. And he's been really, really good for them. Here's one of the biggest reasons, though, I give South Carolina the nod. Guys, did you know that Florida does not have a special teams coordinator? They just don't have one. They've got 2 offensive line coaches, but no special teams coach. One of the wildest things I've ever heard in my entire life. And so that is a big reason. I still believe in Kai Kroger, Mitch Jeter. I think the demise of Kai Kroger is being vastly overplayed just because Beamer Ball is not winning games like it did at the end of last season. Mitch Jeter still as solid as they come. And for that reason, guys, I still do give the nod to the Gamecocks when it comes to the kicker punter position. And one of the biggest reasons is because South Carolina's kickers and punters are led by Pete Limbo. Florida's kickers and punters are led by nobody. They're led by nobody. So I do give the nod to South Carolina. Finally, guys, coaching. Who's got the nod on the sidelines in this game? On the Florida side, you've got Billy Napier, second-year head coach, who I think all would agree it felt like he was on somewhat of a hot seat coming into this season, right? The standout on their staff is defensive coordinator Austin Armstrong. And I think that was a hiring that was under somewhat of scrutiny, right? Because it's a guy that 29-year-old DC, a guy who's never been a defensive coordinator before, obviously got the vote of confidence from Nick Saban getting hired on his staff, I think as a linebackers coach. But that was a real roll of the dice. Austin Armstrong, though, has been fantastic as a DC. Rob Sale, their offensive coordinator. And you listen to Gator fans, guys, it's really Billy Napier's offense. Billy Napier is the one calling the shots. He's calling the offense. And you'll hear it in our conversation with inallkindsweather.com. They feel as if Billy Napier's got to go out and really hire a true OC because Rob Sale right now is the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, right? Like he's not the true OC, okay? Like a Dabble Loggins is or somebody else, if you will. Then, like I mentioned, guys, there's no special teams coordinator. There's no special teams coach for the Florida Gators. And this is one that, again, I went back and forth on, guys, admittedly. I went back and forth on this because I think you look at Billy Napier, what he's doing in recruiting, that big win over Tennessee. Like, I think there's signs of life in that Florida program, that progression is happening and good things are on the way. But while some are starting to doubt Shane Beamer and some are starting to doubt the future of the program under his leadership, guys, despite a rough first 5 games of year 3 of his tenure, you cannot forget all the goodwill they've built up, all the big wins they've had, all the ways they've overachieved. And then you look at the staff top to bottom. South Carolina actually has an OC in Dabble Loggins, who I think to this point has been solid. He's been an upgrade, no doubt. Now, at defensive coordinator, I'd tip my cap to Florida. I'd take Austin Armstrong in a heartbeat right now over Clayton White. It is what it is. And then again, you've got Pete Limbo, I would say the best special teams coach in all of college football, and Florida has nobody. So, I almost went push here. But I've got to give the nod to the Gamecocks when it comes to the coaching side of things. I think Billy Napier is a much better coach than people, especially Gamecock fans, like to give him credit for. But I still give the nod to Shane Beamer because he's more established. He's done more at his respective school. These two coaches are 1-1. Actually, excuse me. Shane Beamer's 0-1 because Shane Beamer's one win against Florida came against Dan Mullen. So this is a big game for Shane Beamer, right? Billy Napier and the Gators take you down. All of a sudden, we might have a different conversation. It might be much more of a push than advantage Gamecocks. But only one coach entered this season on the hot seat. That was Billy Napier, not Shane Beamer, and Shane Beamer's not there yet. And I think top to bottom, South Carolina does have overall a better staff than what Florida presents. So for that reason, I give the nod to the Gamecocks for their coaching staff, and the advantage should be on the South Carolina sideline on Saturday afternoon. Guys, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our first break of the day. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling here on this hump day. All that and more, you're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, October the 11th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Do not forget, coming up at 1:15, we've got my good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South of College Football Uncensored, talking everything Gamecocks, SEC, and everything in between. With that being said, guys, we keep the conversation rolling here on this Wednesday as I list my key matchups heading into South Carolina's game against the Florida Gators. 3 key matchups that I think are going to go a really, really long way in determining who finds victory on Saturday afternoon at Williams-Brice Stadium. And we start, guys, as we all know, the passing game is going to be pivotal for South Carolina. I don't think it's this week where the Gamecocks probably find their running game and rush for 200 yards a game or what have you. And, you know, what's interesting is that you talk to Florida folks, and it's their top-rated DB. It's their top defensive back they are most worried about. So my first key matchup, Gamecocks wide receiver Xavier Legette against Florida defensive back Jason Marshall Jr. And Xavier Legette, somewhat limited against Tennessee. You know Florida's going to be looking at that film. You've got to find a way to get 17 going, right? He's your top target. He's your top guy. Outside of him, the passing attack is lacking somewhat. But he is your big-time threat, right? He's your big-time playmaker on the outside. The reason I list Jason Marshall Jr. here is because you talk to any Florida fan, Florida, personality, anyone who covers the team, they will tell you this is a guy who has been a liability for them this season. I mean, they are genuinely, truly concerned about his production on the outside. This has to be a matchup. This has to be an area that South Carolina takes advantage of. No doubt about it. This has got to be an area because, again, guys, I think we'd all agree. The Gamecocks are not going to win this football game if they don't hit some big plays in the passing game. If they don't hit some explosives down the field in the passing game, if Spencer Rattler and Xavier Legette don't get going. So you've got to find a way, because you know Florida's going to be watching that Tennessee film. They're going to watch ways. How can we take 17 away? How can we make Spencer Rattler go to someone else? You got to find ways to get your top target open, and he should have a chance to have a field day against a guy in Jason Marshall Jr. that, again, Florida fans, they don't even like mentioning this guy's name, right? Because he's just been such a liability for them at this point in this season. So Xavier Legette, Jason Marshall Jr., going to be a fun matchup to watch on the outside. And it's one, guys, that South Carolina should be able to take advantage of. They should be able to hit some big plays downfield. My second key matchup, running the ball, stopping the run. Welcome to SEC football. That's going to be the case yet again. Which team is able to do that more effectively? Going to go a long way in determining who wins this ball game. And I've talked about this all week long. One of the top matchups I'm watching for, South Carolina's rushing defense against Florida's rushing offense. Because on paper right now, it's the secondary that's hindering South Carolina. But you go back and look at that Tennessee game, guys, the Gamecocks were gutted. And we've talked about it all week. I don't think Carolina can afford to play soft and play off and kind of let Florida dictate the ball game, especially on the ground. You've got to slow down that two-headed monster. Debo Williams against Montrell Johnson. Debo Williams, obviously the linebacker position for the Gamecocks, a physical, a real physical player, is a guy that is more than willing to stick his face in there and make a big tackle and give up his body to make the play. And he's going to have to do that a lot. He's going to have to do that early. He's going to have to do that often. He's going to have to lead by example in that rushing defense for South Carolina. Probably going to have one of his best games that he's had to this point in the season. And then you look at Montrell Johnson on the Florida side. Guys, he's been fantastic. I mean, Montrell Johnson, I think one of the best running backs in the SEC. He runs with power. He runs with speed. He has great vision. You saw him last week against Vanderbilt, but he's been great all season, right? It's not just that Vandy game. He's been a fantastic player all year. The Gamecocks, you might recall him from last year as well. And again, that was without Trevor Etienne last week to help him out in that 1-2 punch. If they've got that going as well, guys, it's going to be really tough. And you look at Florida. It's very simple. Games where they can't run the football, they don't have success. Florida doesn't win when they cannot run the football. You're going to need great play out of the linebacker position, not just Debo Williams, Stone Blant as well, Bam Martin, Scott, Pup Howard, everybody who graces the field, because Florida, I have to imagine, they're going to want to establish the run early. They're going to want to establish the run often. This matchup between Debo Williams, Montrell Johnson, and can South Carolina not necessarily stop the Florida rushing attack? Can they just hold their own? Can they avoid these long, drawn-out drives, 6, 7, 8-minute drives with a running clock? Because you know Florida is going to try to play keep away and keep Spencer Rattler, Xavier Legette, and that Gamecocks offense off the field. So Debo Williams, Montrell Johnson, good on good, physicality on physicality. Cannot wait to watch those two dudes meet in the hole and go at it all day Saturday afternoon. And finally, guys, what does South Carolina get out of their offensive line? If the Gamecocks can't protect Spencer Rattler, nothing we're talking about matters anyways, right? And it's to a point where if I see Spencer Rattler set his feet, guys, I'm expecting really good things to happen. Like, I'm expecting a completion. I'm expecting a big play down the field. I can count on one hand the amount of times that Spencer Rattler has dropped back, surveyed the field, set his feet, and the throw he has delivered hasn't been a really good one. Also, you got to think about establishing some sort of a run game, some semblance of balance. And it all starts up front in the interior, and your leader of the offensive line at this point, Gamecocks guard Nick Gargiulo against Cam Jackson, the big body in the middle, the Memphis transfer who has been so good for them, right? Gator fans, Gator folks have raved about this kid. Been a really nice addition, a really nice pickup from the portal. I mean, we saw South Carolina's offensive line guys against Tennessee get beaten all kinds of different ways, right? And I don't know that Florida's got quite the pass rush. I don't know if they've got quite the front seven that Tennessee had, right? Only 9 sacks in the year. They haven't exactly been fantastic at getting after the quarterback. But it starts with your leader up front. It starts with your leader in Nick Gargiulo, getting the best out of him, going up against a guy mano a mano with Cam Jackson. That's going to be a really, really fun battle to watch in the trenches. You've got to be able to hold your own, both for the running game and Mario Anderson and balance, and also giving Spencer Rattler time to operate. So again, guys, my 3 key matchups: Xavier Legette against Jason Marshall Jr., Debo Williams against Montrell Johnson, and Nick Gargiulo against Cam Jackson. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into another quick break. On the other side, we'll do our weekly drive around the SEC as I look at the full slate of games and give my brief thoughts on each of the games in the SEC this weekend. All that and more on the other side. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose, while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie Ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, October the 11th, 2023. Let me say thank you yet again for each and every single one of you tuning in here on this hump day. As it's Florida week, Gamecocks are back on the field on Saturday. Really excited for it. Really looking forward to it, guys, to see South Carolina return to action and see if they can get back in the win column in both SEC play and overall as well. Guys, do not forget at 1:15, we got my good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, college football, or excuse me, Saturday Down South and College Football Uncensored. He is upcoming at 1:15 in our second hour. We're going to talk all things Gamecocks, SEC, and everything in between. With that being said, guys, we do our weekly drive around the SEC as we take a look at the SEC slate and all the action upcoming this weekend. And we start in Nashville, Tennessee. How about this? A noon kickoff on CBS. Vanderbilt hosting the number one ranked Georgia Bulldogs, and poor Vandy. I mean, just poor Vandy, man. Poor Vandy. What can you really expect if you're the Commodores? I mean, Georgia's going to paint the stadium red and black, by the way. This is going to be a de facto Georgia home game. Obviously, the Dogs coming off a huge win over Kentucky. I don't think many of us are expecting the Dogs to have much issue. Georgia, a 31-point favorite in this football game, and that still may not be enough. Should be another great opportunity for Carson Beck and company to keep the passing game rolling. Obviously, like I mentioned, he is actually on pace to set the Georgia single-season passing yards record in this season. And then Vandy. I'm curious, though, how Ken Seals fares at the quarterback position, but I don't think for a Vanderbilt football team that is struggling, I don't think this is where they get it going necessarily. So could be a long afternoon for the folks in Nashville, but good. You know what? Good for Vandy getting a CBS game. Good for Vandy. Good for you, Vanderbilt. Good for you, Clark Lee. We move to Tuscaloosa, guys. Alabama taking on Arkansas on a noon kickoff on ESPN. The 11th ranked Crimson Tide are a double-digit favorite in this one. I think that line has now jumped up to minus 20. I've already locked in Alabama at minus 19.5, guys, and I'm most curious to see, are there any signs of life from Arkansas? Like is Arkansas done? Are they cooked? Is that hog cooked? Or do we see an Arkansas team that rises to the occasion, that gives Bama a scare? Because, I still don't think this is the old Alabama. I don't think this is an Alabama we say, oh, they're head and shoulders above everybody else in the SEC West. They're going to run away with it. They're going to be undefeated in Atlanta. They very well may go win out the rest of the way and go meet Georgia in Atlanta. Who knows what happens at that point. But I still think this is a Bama team that I think Arkansas can cover that spread and give a good game, competitive game too. But you have to question the buy-in. You got to question the mentality. I mean, obviously Sam Pittman, guys, his seat is scorching hot at this point, which you hate to say because we all love Coach Pittman, but that seat is on fire right now. And then Alabama, Jalen Milroe, building off of that big game in his previous outing against Texas A&M. Is Alabama able to get more from the run game? But overall, this is a game in Tuscaloosa, again, a noon kick. For me, I'm more so curious about Arkansas. I expect Bama to win this football game, but what do we get out of the Hogs, right? Are they done? Are they finished? Are they kaput? Is there season history? Or is there anything encouraging coming out of this one for Sam Pittman's team? And most importantly, Dan Enos and that offensive attack. Guys, moving to Knoxville, Tennessee, taking on Texas A&M. This one's going to be a ton of fun. 3:30 kick on CBS. Who needs this one more? Josh Heupel or Jimbo Fisher? A lot of pressure on both. I got to say, though, it's Jimbo. Dude, if Texas A&M picks up their third loss of the season, and we're in early October still, third loss of the season in early October, things are going to heat up to unprecedented levels in College Station. Meanwhile, on the Tennessee side, just beat the Gamecocks tails, coming off a bye week. This game on Rocky Top, home field advantage has meant so much throughout this season. What's life like after Brew McCoy, the unfortunate injury of one of Tennessee's top weapons on the outside? Are they able to continue to keep the run game going? How does Joe Milton fare against a really tough Texas A&M defensive front, but a very gettable secondary? I think this game, guys, you already know I'm taking the over in this ball game. I think this one's going to be a ton of fun, man. Back and forth, shootout type of game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I do think it's a really close game. This is one of those coin flip 50-50 SEC games that I cannot wait to watch. Of course, Gamecocks and Gators will be on the big screen at 3:30, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Tennessee and Texas A&M and just what this one has in store, because there's a lot on the line for both of these individual programs. We go, guys, to Death Valley, LSU and Auburn, the 22nd ranked LSU Tigers hosting Auburn, who's an 11-point underdog in this game. And I have to correct myself from early on in the week, because I said this game was on the Plains at Jordan-Hare. I stand corrected. It is not on the Plains. It is at LSU, a 7 o'clock kick on ESPN. That being said, though, this is one of those rivalries, guys, where just weird things happen, right? When you've got multiple games in your series that have their own nicknames, that's how you know this isn't just any old rivalry, if you will. This isn't just any old SEC West matchup. Like LSU and Auburn, strange things happen when these two teams go at it. For LSU, you know, this is deficiency on deficiency when it's Auburn's offense against LSU's defense. If LSU's defense can't bounce back in this game, have some sort of a bounce back performance, guys, I don't know if there's any hope. I don't know if there's any hope for Brian Kelly and the Bayou Bengals defensively. And it makes no sense when you got Mekhi Wingo and Mason Smith and Harold Perkins. And I know the corners are not good. The secondary's a deficiency, but like, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe what they've been on defense. Meanwhile, on the flip side, Auburn, very stingy, very physical defensively. LSU, high-flying offense with Jaden Daniels. But is this a situation this weekend? Is this a situation where Jaden Daniels, similar to what Spencer Rattler's having to do in Columbia, does Jaden Daniels have to put the Superman cape on and play out of his mind for LSU to get the victory? I think this one's going to be really fun. I've already taken Auburn plus 11, guys. I told you don't be shocked that the Tigers win straight up. But either way, I think LSU, Auburn, this will be a game that comes down to the wire. And those matchups within the matchups, if you will, going to be so much fun to watch on Saturday night, guys. And finally, Kentucky hosting the Missouri Tigers, a 7:30 kick on SEC Network. How does the Kentucky fan base respond after Mark Stoops' comments about NIL and we need more money to get better players? How do they respond to that? I'm sure Kroger Field will still be rocking, if you will, but it's kind of a weird position to be in when you feel like, as a fan base, your head coach called you out, right? Your head coach called you out straight up. Either way, though, on the field, the 24th ranked Wildcats licking their wounds coming out of Athens. Both these teams coming off of losses, right? Kentucky, that blowout in Athens against Georgia, and Missouri, that tough loss to LSU. This is a fascinating game because I think this is one of those guys, goes without saying, it's going to go a long way in determining who's the second best team in the SEC East. Because I think that's still up for grabs right now. I would say between Tennessee, Kentucky, and Missouri, I think those are your most likely. I think Florida and South Carolina, they are more so fighting for that number 4 or 5 spot or even 6 spot in the SEC East. But this Kentucky-Mizzou game, home field advantage has meant so much. You don't want to overplay it. You don't want to overstate what it means. But a night game at Kroger Field, Wildcats and Tigers, this quarterback battle, right? I give Mizzou the edge there with Brady Cook going up against Devin Leary. Does Kentucky finally start to get something out of Devin Leary? Is Missouri able to start looking more like Missouri on the defensive side of the football? This is such a great game, guys. Evenly matched ball game. The spread, I think, is like 2.5. Kentucky's the favorite. Like, literally, they're the favorite because they're the home team, right? And we knew over the summer we were going to get so many of these 50-50 toss-up matchups, if you will. Cannot wait to watch this one play out because I think these are two teams on very even footing, very even ground. And again, going to go a long way in determining who the second best team or even third best team in the SEC East is. Who's the contender? Who's the pretender? Who's able to respond more effectively, right? From a really tough outing in their previous ball game. Going to be really fun to watch as the action unfolds between the Wildcats and the Tigers Saturday night in Lexington. Guys, that being said, we're going to take a quick break and set the scene for our good friend Chris Marler from Saturday Down South and Saturday Football Uncensored. All that and more, guys, on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Wednesday, October the 11th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We await our good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored. Really excited to talk with Chris about everything Gamecocks, SEC, everything in between, everything upcoming this weekend, everything that was in the previous weekend. Guys, can you believe that we have hit the halfway point of the 2023 season? Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy to think that we're already at that point? Just wild. Guys, next week, going to be a really exciting week too, because of course, South Carolina will be at the halfway point officially of their season. 6 games in, 6 more to go. We'll have our mid-season report card. I'm not exactly sure what day we'll do that. I'll take a look at the schedule. Maybe Tuesday would be a good day for it. Either way, we'll go through. We'll grade everything from offense, defense, special teams, coaching, and give an overall grade as well. And then look ahead of the second half of the season and project it and give our thoughts. And obviously, we'll talk about it and conversate and look ahead of the game that weekend as the Gamecocks will take on Mizzou in Como next weekend. Again, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Let's see. Our good friend Austin Gregory asked about trying to place an order from Carolina Cigars website for the weekend, but he's getting an error message that pops up. And I told him, and I'll tell you all as well, shoot Carolina Cigars a DM or give them a call to order your cigars. I know their website, there might be some things on the back end that are not quite working the way they should. If that happens to you as well, shoot them a DM. Give them a call, guys. Tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent you, and they will take care of you. I can assure you of that, right? You'll have no issues there, I promise. And those guys are great to work with. Hey, they ship super, super fast, too. It's awesome. You order your Gator Packs right now, they're going to have them for you. Speaking of that, by the way, if you want to get your Gator Packs in person on Saturday, you can do so with the S&G parking lot right beside Waffle House, right outside of Williams-Brice Stadium. The guys will be posted up there with the Gator Pack, selling cigars on hand. Be sure you check them out. James Kendall in the Discord says, if Andy Reid isn't coaching our first Olympic football team, I don't want to live in that world. Just FYI. Good to know. Good to know. Andy Reid would be a good one. Yeah. I'd go Andy Reid. I'd go Andy Reid for sure. Guys, also, I'll mention the decommitment from 4-star athlete Jalewis Solomon. My, oh my, how the turntables, man. how things can turn so quickly. It's recruiting. The wild, wild west. Welcome to it. The world of NIL, transfer portal, just recruiting madness. That's why, guys, I'll just say this and I'll leave it alone. That's why it's probably a smart idea to not lose your cool, right? To not lose your cool when kids commit elsewhere. Just let it play out. See what happens. If they flip, great. If they don't, all we got's all we need. That's why it's best to let the process play out. I'll just say that. That's why it's best to let it play out. Either way, guys, again, we await Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored, at Vern Funquist on social media. Gamecocks coordinators speaking to the media today. Let's see. Davil says, we are a 2-3 football team. No matter how you want to spin it, that's what our record is. That's fact. Quote, our vision for what is going to be is irrelevant, or what it was going to be is irrelevant. It's our vision for what it can be with what we have. He then said, quote, I wish I could say if we change this one thing, we've had no efficient runs, but it's 11 guys playing more fundamentally sound football. Okay, so always interesting to hear the coordinators. Thankfully, though, guys, the coordinator press conferences aren't as must-see TV as they were last year, and that's not a positive thing to say that, because the only reason they were is because you could always count on some crazy quote coming from Marcus Satterfield on a week-in, week-out basis. Okay, we got him in, guys. We're going to go ahead and get him on. He joins us every single Wednesday to talk all things Gamecocks, SEC, everything in between. Our good friend Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored, and of course, he's at Vern Funquist on social media. Chris, what's going on, man? Great to chat with you once again.
Yeah, man, good to be here.
Chris, I'll start you off with a zinger. Which coach's future, I should say, are you more concerned about at their respective school? Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M or Sam Pittman at Arkansas?
Fisher, because if they're crazy enough to sign him to a $93 million contract, I think they're crazy enough to fire him. Because money's not real in college football. Like I keep saying, like they would have to pay him $76.8 million before January 1st. If he makes it January 1st, it'd be $67 million. I still think A&M's a good team, though. I think with Arkansas, it's like you still have to look at Sam Pittman stuff and think, all right, well, they had a combined 8 wins from 2017 to 2019, and they had 9 alone in 2021. So, like, what are the expectations? Like, where's the ceiling supposed to be? Because it's probably closer to the floor than a place like A&M. So I think if you have normal and rational expectations, he should not be fired. But I mean, that's normal and rational is never 2 words that describe fan bases or boosters in college football.
On that note, Chris, let's go ahead and dive into it. In that game that took place in College Station, of course, as always, Texas A&M was the sexy pick to upset Alabama. And, of course, Alabama goes in there and Jalen Milroe dices up the A&M defense, sets career highs in passing yards, amongst other things. Your thoughts on that game, the way it played out, and what impressed you the most about Jalen Milroe and that offensive performance?
Well, I mean, I'll say just like I'm just in a mood today, so I'm just going to be as spicy as they come. My most impressive thing was the fact that against all odds, against every single bit of horseshit that came out of that SEC officiating crew, and having 10 more penalties called in Alabama than in A&M. If you don't think that's a problem, because I hear it all the fucking time about Bama getting all the calls. If you don't think that's a problem, it's the 3rd time in their last 6 road games they've been flagged 10 more times or more than their opponent. Shocking that Bama gets all the calls, and those are the actual factual numbers I throw out there. You can tell that I'm over it, and I'm not mad still. It's like 5 days later, 6 days later, whatever it is. I thought it was really impressive what they were able to do. I think at one point, in the 4th quarter, they had 13 penalties and 13 rushing yards. Like that offensive line continues to be a problem. But Jalen Milroe was fantastic. And I never thought I would live to see a day where Jermaine Burton was somehow going to be the hero of it. That kid is the worst. But I mean, like, I think Jalen Milroe, there's so much to like there, what he's able to do. It was a really, really good old school Alabama type win, except for the fact that he had 320 something yards passing. Like he was almost 70% through the air. He had over 300 yards passing. Like you just said, he diced them up. He did it in the intermediate passing game more than anything. And that defense was absolutely chaotic, especially in the second half. I think it will be fun to watch Bama fans the rest of the year, because even as like a self-proclaimed Bama fan, the worst fan base, like it is hilarious to watch Bama fans and how uncomfortable they are with this. Like, we're down 7 at halftime. The sky is falling. This is the worst thing ever. Like, it's hilarious to watch. I thought it was a really good win, though.
Chris, the SEC West is just fascinating right now. That takes me to LSU and Mizzou, which was another classic game, 49-39. LSU with that big second half comeback. Mm-hmm. How concerned should LSU fans be about that defense? That to me is one of the most surprising things at this point, is how bad they've been defensively. Like, Jaden Daniels has to put a Superman cape on every week and win despite it. I mean, it's a good road win, but like, when you look at it, it's like I just continue to be amazed how bad they are defensively.
Yeah, it's shocking, to be honest. It is because there's so much talent, right? Like
it's Bo Pelini-esque. It's Bo Pelini-esque, truly.
It really is. And like you had a year ago, you had the best player on defense in all of college football, and he's still on the team. He was only a freshman a year ago, and he's just been kind of like so far this year. So I think that like, it's been odd to watch. It's been really odd to watch because the secondary, you hear that old DBU thing, all that kind of stuff, and it's not even close to that. The secondary has just been really, really bad. And so I think it's concerning. But here's the thing about LSU that people don't get is that they have 2 losses, right? If they win out, there's still a very good chance they get to Atlanta. I think like the idea that there's so many teams that we're just crossing off as like they're not going to make the playoff, they're not going to make the playoff. When's the last time you saw an SEC team not make the BCS or national title game or CFP? I know it hasn't happened in the CFP. I mean, so like, when was it? I'm genuinely asking. 2005?
Was it the Texas Southern Cal game?
Mm-hmm. So 18 years ago. So like, if you're telling me that LSU loses 2 games and gets to Atlanta and beats Bama, and then they start this, like, because you got to think about how that season's playing out too. If LSU wins the rest of the season, you're only building more momentum. Jaden Daniels is already squarely in the Heisman Trophy race, and that's only going to continue if he continues like this torrid pace. So like, if that keeps happening, you get to the end of the season, and then you beat a Georgia team who is absolutely susceptible to a loss this season. I don't see you just can't convince me on October 11th that the SEC would not get in with the 2-loss team, because we haven't seen it before, right? So I think that there's a lot on the table still for them. You would have to assume they can only improve on defense because it can't get much worse.
Let's move to Oxford, Chris, before we talk about Georgia. No Oxford.
Okay,
no Oxford.
Okay.
Ole Miss gets the W. How much of a chance? I know Alabama's already disposed of them, and they've still got Georgia on the slate. So I think that's probably the biggest thing going against them. But they get a nice win at home, 27-20 against Arkansas. We've kind of already mentioned the Hogs and the struggles with Sam Pitt. I'm admittedly I'm worried about Arkansas. I don't know if I've got a soft spot for them because Arkansas reminds me so much of South Carolina and their fan base and their passion and kind of some of the struggles they've had also. But Ole Miss, man, just kind of keeps on keeping on. I know they had that loss to Bama, but you get the big win over LSU. And then, Arkansas, the game wasn't flashy, but it was a good win nonetheless. I mean, what do you make of this Ole Miss team, and how much of a chance do you give them to where it's like they're still squarely in it as well?
Yeah. No, they are. And I think they've kind of been a forgotten team, even if it's just with me. Because like you said, they lost to Bama. But the resiliency factor of Ole Miss has been really impressive. You saw it against Tulane and then kind of pulling away late in that game with some defensive stops. You lose to Bama, who we don't know what Bama is. Like, Bama could be really good, right? Like, people don't want to admit that, but like, because it was such an ugly loss and they only had 10 points in that game, that is a concern. But I think that, like, you get up for the Bama game, then you have to get back up for the LSU game, right? With your back against the wall in September. And then you got to go play Arkansas. The resiliency factor of it, to me, has been really impressive because I feel like we're starting to see Lane Kiffin evolve a little bit as a coach and be like, hey, we're not just going to come out here firing on all cylinders every time. Like, sometimes you have to gut out a win. And that's what they were able to do. They've done that 2 weeks in a row. And one of those teams is an impressive win because it's LSU. The other team is not because it's Arkansas. I do think that this was a really, really good team still. And offensively, like, we open talking about LSU, right? Like, if there's another team in the conference that is going to be able to get by with how good their offense is, let alone or despite their defense, it's Ole Miss. And so going on the road to Georgia is going to be so interesting because I don't even know if it matters if Ole Miss has more on the line for them or not. I think it almost helps them if they have another loss on that record before going to Athens, because then Lane can really get into his bag and play. We got nothing to lose. We can do whatever the fuck we want to do. Like watch us go for 11 fourth downs, right? Like, and really put pressure on this Georgia team. I don't know if it matters if they lose another game or not to get there. I don't know what that game is going to look like because, like, Georgia's offense looked really good last week. But Ole Miss is absolutely a team that can still run the table. All of their stuff is out of the way.
Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, definitely a team that can give you headaches. I would imagine looking way too far ahead, that'll be the case when they go to Athens. Speaking of Athens, Georgia, how impressed were you with the Dogs, Chris? Because they've been kind of sleepwalking through the season. It sort of felt like, right, going down 14-3 to Carolina and some of the other games against lesser competition. And of course, this is a Bama fan. Like, when you're doing what Georgia's doing, you're not being judged against, are you the best team in the East of the SEC? You're being judged against, are you good enough to go back to back to back, right? That's what you're being judged against. I think Georgia reminded folks that they are still the creme de la creme in the SEC, just blasting Kentucky. We'll start with Georgia first, and I want to get to the Mark Stoops stuff in Kentucky. But I mean, how thoroughly impressed were you with Georgia? And they're winning with this passing game and Carson Beck, and he's literally on pace right now to set the single season passing yards record at Georgia. I mean, what stood out to you most from just a complete performance?
Well, first off, I don't know if that's like a crazy impressive stat to break the season pass record at Georgia, but I mean, like, Carson Beck has been really, really good all season. his performance has been way better than this team's performance all season long. I think it's twofold. I think like it's easy to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, they're back. They've played 6 games. They've played 1 complete game, and they played it against a Kentucky team who had the 124th strength of schedule in the country coming into that game. It just sets up so perfectly for a number of reasons, because it's like now all the fans will be like, oh my God, they've been sleepwalking the whole time, like you just said, and they came in, listen, their schedule is wildly easy. I still think Georgia is going to become a victim at some point to that own strength of schedule being so weak, and like going into a situation like last year when they played Ohio State, they had been in games throughout the year where they got punched in the mouth a little bit, like Mizzou or something like that. I don't know if that's the case this year because they haven't played anybody worth a shit so far, and like they go on the road and play a very bad Auburn team and are in a dogfight for 57 minutes against them. It's a really good win. Like you won by 38, right? You played a ranked opponent and you beat them by 38 points. You can't take anything away from that. And I think now if you're Kirby, you can also look at this team and be like, hey, like all the complacency, because like that's where they're fighting is complacency. Like you won back-to-back natties. You haven't lost in like since like the Trump administration or something. Like it's crazy. Like they've gone on and on and on with like these incredible streaks, right? At the same time, like it's hard to keep 18, 22-year-old kids focused and up. And I say 18, 22 because Stetson's gone, so it's not 18 to 26. So it's hard to keep 18, 22-year-olds focused going into like a full 12, 14 weeks of a season. And this is now something Kirby can put up like on his bulletin board and be like, hey, this is what it could look like. Like this is what it can look like if you guys want to be as dominant and reach your potential every single game. I don't know what it looks like this week because they're playing Vandy and they're going to just skull drag Vandy. But I mean, yeah, I was impressed, but I also think it's one of those things where it's like, you still haven't really played anybody and we need to pump the brakes a little bit because it's still so early in the season. I think they're a really good football team. I still don't know if they're the number 1 team in the country.
Are we going to be asking that same question, Chris, all the way up until like the SEC championship? I mean, is there a chance that happens where we still like, is Georgia actually like, I mean, when are they going to get tested, I guess is my question. Like, I mean, and how much of that though has to do with they're just that much better than everybody else? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
part of it is, but I mean, like, yeah.
Don't we wish we had that Georgia Oklahoma game?
I would love to see it, and that's not their fault. But I'm going to definitely hang it in there over their head for a while. Because like here's the thing too is like Georgia. I've heard Georgia fans say it nonstop. It's like all these SEC fans complaining about how weak their strength of schedule is, and part of that is because Georgia's so much better than everybody else. But like, man, am I tired of seeing Georgia play? Like, look who's left on the schedule. Who's left on the schedule? Tennessee and Ole Miss, right?
Right.
So you get one of those games at home, arguably the tougher one at home. Then you got to go to Tennessee. You don't have to play that game until the 13th week of the season.
Don't sleep on Haynes King and Georgia Tech now.
Dude, that's actually not that bad of a point. SDS posted some shit today, and I shouldn't even do this because it's my company, but they posted some today. It was like, have you seen the kick six? What about the pick six or the kick pick six? And I was like, what? And it was like a video or a clip of some like highlight where a ball went off a player's shoe against Ball State and Georgia intercepted it. I was like, no one has seen this because it was fucking Ball State who they were playing. Like no one's watching Georgia Ball State. Anyway, I'm sure I didn't even answer the question, but yeah, we're probably going to be questioning this for most of the rest of the year.
So as we look ahead, Chris, to week 7, we'll start with that Kentucky-Mizzou game, the primetime SEC Network game. But your thoughts on Mark Stoops' comments following the Georgia game on the NIL stuff, and obviously very frustrated after the game. I would imagine it doesn't have any impact or effect on this game, although it's kind of a peculiar position to be in as a fan of that team, to where it's like, okay, my coach just called out my fan base for not supplying more of the bag. Granted, though, they got to put that aside because they got a huge game against Mizzou under the lights at Kroger Field. I think spread's like 2.5. First, your thoughts on the Stoops NIL comments. I mean, do you make anything of it? And then this game as a whole, I think this is going to be one of those games goes a long way in determining who the second or at minimum third best team in the East is.
Yeah, I think that I had zero issues with what he said. Zero issues with what he said. And this day and age of football, like in college football, what did he say that was wrong? Like what? Like, listen, here's the thing. People got so mad. Aaron Murray put out something about this. I love Aaron to death, but he posted something about this the other day. It was like, I can't believe he called his team out like that. And he's whining about how they need to go buy players like Georgia did. Do you know how much more Georgia spends every year recruiting than any other team in the country? It's almost $1.3 million more. Like, that is how they are getting the recruits. And it's all legal, so no one's mad about that. But it's like, if you ask me a question, this is what I always get so upset when people get mad about Saban stuff. It's like, you asked him a question, he answered the question, then you want to go run to your feelings about how, like, oh, I didn't like what he said. He's just complaining about NIL. No, this is the day and age of football. And what Stoops says is completely accurate. Now, where he's going to get in trouble with, in my opinion, this weekend is I don't think they're going to beat Mizzou. I think Mizzou's a better football team. I think they're more dynamic on offense and defense. And I think that, like, the quarterback play has been really bad at Kentucky so far. Not really bad, but not good at Kentucky or consistent. I think that – hold on a second. I think that, like, when you look at the team itself, they're so one-dimensional, right? Like, they can run the football, but Leary, even against Georgia, man, Liam Cohen, like, he was, like, dialing up some really good plays early and had some wide-open guys, like, running free in that secondary, and Leary was nowhere close to being accurate. It's like watching Joe Milton, just like with a beard. And so I think that when you talk about what they can do as a team, I think Missouri is a better football team than them, but something always happens in this game with Mizzou. Where Stoops is going to be in trouble is if Mizzou beats them, now you're going to have a lazy fan base and a lazy narrative, not lazy fan base, but a lazy narrative come into play and say, well, he's complaining about this. He should have been focused on preparing against a team like Mizzou that they should beat. And why should they beat them? Like, why should they beat them? You know what I mean? I think that's going to be the argument I think you're going to see from fans if he loses this game. So he better not lose this game. He's in a tough spot.
And to your point, Chris, because you mentioned that Devin Leary's been whatever, and we talked about surprises in the SEC at sort of the halfway point. Devin Leary's been bad. Like, I've been shocked at how bad he's been, or just not good. He hasn't been good at all. So I don't know. That has been somewhat surprising to me. And like you mentioned, thanks to a pretty soft opening to the schedule, they haven't really had to pay for it. So we'll see if that's the case when Brady Cook and the boys come to town. Let's go to Columbia, man. South Carolina and Florida. This is another fascinating game. I think this is one that if you asked Gamecock fans over the offseason, they would have said this is a revenge game, going to be a blowout. Florida stinks. They're no good. And Florida, Chris, I kind of feel like they were sort of the punching bag all offseason, and they were the team we were all kind of picking on, like they might finish 7th below Vandy. Like, Graham Mertz is the worst quarterback in the world. And, like, I don't think they're all that terrible. They've got plenty of issues and flaws, but, I mean, they're just another one of these middle-of-the-pack SEC teams. And what's so fascinating, Chris, is when you get a game like this where, based off what I have seen, heard, what have you, it's a pair of fan bases that it feels like they are both expecting the worst. And it's like somebody has to win. You know what I mean? Like, somebody's got to go out there and win. So Florida's been abysmal on the road. South Carolina's got the 3:30 kick, not the night game kick. You come off the bye week. You were, you were throttled by Tennessee the last time you were out. I mean, what do you make of this game? Because this is a huge game for both these head coaches, too. I know Billy Napier's not going anywhere, nor is Shane Beamer, but just for the overall morales of these fan bases, it's a big one. This is a really, really big one for each of these respective schools. Yeah,
I think that I don't think you're wrong that it's a huge game for both coaches. I really don't. I don't think it's what's the best way to say this? Like, I don't think it's fair or logical. Like, I think it's like the Beamer stuff is that schedule was never going to be changed. And not in a rude way to South Carolina, because I love South Carolina and I live in Lexington and all that stuff. But it's arrogant as shit for Carolina fans who have gone into a season and been like, yeah, that Florida game, that's a dub. That's a dub. And the whole SEC did it. Tennessee did it with Florida. A bunch of these teams did it. And then they went out there and played the defending back-to-back Pac-12 champs and got beat by the defending back-to-back Pac-12 champs. I had a hard time saying that very fast. Despite having a backup quarterback, I don't care. Like, you went on the road and played a tough Utah team, and immediately everyone was just chomping at the bit, no pun intended, to be like, Florida's washed, Napier's gone, he's going to be fired. And then, they are an underwhelming as shit team to watch. Like, the offense is so boring. It's so boring. But Mertz has been better than people have given him credit for, and Napier has too. The defense has been really, really good. It's something that I think that, like, if you look at the biggest concern for me every time Carolina takes the field are they going to be able to get enough help with Spencer Rattler for him to be successful? And are they going to be able to protect Spencer Rattler so he's upright for the entire game? Spencer Rattler and that offensive line, the offensive line's been pretty bad all year, right? But Florida is tied for last, surprisingly enough, with South Carolina in the conference in sacks this season. So you don't have something like that where it's going to necessarily, scare you with Florida. I do think that there's a lot on the line from like a divisional standpoint and like the trajectory of where these two seasons can go. But I have a hard time buying into the whole thing. It's like, you know what? It's a must-win game for either coach.
And to your point, Chris, I'll just say this from the Gamecock perspective. We say how pivotal a game it is for each respective coach, but I was stunned the chatter around Shane Beamer after the Tennessee game. It brought to light. It was a very sobering reminder, Chris, from me that no coach is immune to the effects of losing. It doesn't matter how great your culture is or all the goodwill you've built up or you had this win or that. Like, it matters. You're only as good as your last game. You're only as good as your last season. Like, some of the chatter, like I for a while thought, okay, like this fan base is going to be extremely patient because they love Beamer. They're going to give him X amount of years. Like, I'm starting to question that. Like, I'm starting to second guess that. And that's not a position I thought I was going to be in. You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird feeling. So to your point, the loser of this game should not be on any sort of hot seat. But like you said at the beginning, fans, that is not synonymous with rational takes and reaction. So there you go. To Rocky Top, speaking of a pair of head coaches that need a win, Josh Heupel in this game, Tennessee hosting Texas A&M. Chris, if Texas A&M loses a third game before the middle of October, it could get ugly. It could get ugly. I think this is going to be one of the most fun games of the weekend. I like the over the total. I think it's a lot of points. Would you agree, disagree, and just kind of thoughts? I mean, do you have a lean? I mean, again, this is another one of those like 2.5, 3-point spreads that flip a coin. It can go either way.
So the way to beat Tennessee, because regardless of all the flashy stuff we saw last year with Hooker and throw the ball deep and all the stuff with the Biletnikoff and Jalen Hyatt and all that kind of things, all those kind of things, Joe Milton can throw the ball 1,000 yards, right? He's Uncle Rico, but like at the same time, I think he has the lowest amount of like yards to the line of scrimmage per pass. I don't know. SEC stat cat Greg Brooks stood out there. He's a smarter person than me, knows what he's talking about. But it's like they throw a majority of their offense in the passing game is like screen passes, and the offense itself is actually predicated off the run. And it's surprising to say that. So like the way to stop Tennessee is stopping the run with like light boxes, right? Like you need to be able to stop them with like 6 in the box consistently throughout a game. And if there's a team in the SEC that can do that, right? Or you look at any teams that would be able to do it. I think it's Georgia, maybe Bama, but a solid number 2 on that is Texas A&M. Texas A&M is coming off a 3-game stretch where, I mean, they've had 20 total sacks in their last 3 games. 20 total sacks in the last 3 games. That is outstanding work from that defensive line. They had 30 tackles for loss, I think, total in the 2 games going into Alabama. I don't know how many they had against Bama, but it seemed like 1 million. So I have zero doubt in my mind that they are going to be able to match up well with them in like the phone booth, right? I don't think they're going to be able to like keep it in the phone booth because I think that like you look at what Heupel wants to do on offense, it's never that, right? But what beat A&M last week? Like what beat A&M in both games? Tyler Van Dyke from Miami had like a career day where he's just going off and throwing the ball deep, like 300-something yards. Jalen Milroe, career day. Like it took 2 career days so far to beat A&M. This is not a bad team. People love to talk about how like they've become like a punching bag, like UCF has, like Notre Dame in the postseason for whatever reason, because it's A&M. They've got a lot of money, and we all hate Jimbo Fisher with good reason. But that being said, Joe Milton is not even. He's definitely not Tyler Van Dyke. He's not even Jalen Milroe. He's not that accurate. He can throw it a mile, but like he can't do it accurately. You've seen that. I mean, he had like think about how bad that defense played for South Carolina, and he had 1 passing touchdown.
2 picks too. 2 picks.
And he was at home in a game that's circled over everything else. So like, I think that even coming off the bye week, unless something has like drastically changed, I think that A&M. I don't know how Jimbo's going to rally the troops or any of that kind of stuff, but I think Jimbo has been under some unfair criticism. And I listen. My co-host at FSU grad, I don't like Jimbo Fisher. I don't like Bobby Petrino. I think DJ Durkin is a bag of shit. But like, I will also tell you It is like the worst big three ever. It's like if the Celtics had 3 Kevin Garnetts. Like it is the worst grouping of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach in the world. But that being said, like him being under fire for the whole thing about like should they have gone for it on 4th and 1, that is absurd to me because we saw it last year on the 1 yard line when he went for it and they lost the game on the 1 yard line. In this year's game, when they had 3rd and short on the first drive, didn't get it. 4th and short, first drive, didn't get it. I mean, teams have lost doing that against Alabama. Look at Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. And we just wanted to drag Jimbo Fisher, who had a very good defense out there the entire day. I think this is a game that A&M does what they always do, which is Undertaker gift, come back alive, ruin everyone's Saturday. And because I still think they're a good team. Also, fuck Tennessee.
There we go. That's what I was waiting on. I was going to say ruin everyone's Saturday. I was like, I think there's some people that would enjoy watching the Vols get beat down, including those in Garnet and Black probably. LSU hosting Auburn. I feel like, Chris, you've got a really, really fun rivalry when you have multiple games that have their own nicknames, right? Like that. Yeah. That to me says some weird things have happened in this series. Auburn's an 11-point dog. LSU at home at night, though. Can Auburn not just cover? Do you think they can win this game? I get this weird feeling that Auburn can go in there and make something crazy happen. And it's so interesting. It's like deficiency on deficiency. It's Auburn's horrific offense against LSU's terrible defense. Yeah. It's like something's got to give, right?
Yeah, I think that what has to give here is one, if you're LSU, you get to kind of come back to the friendly confines of your home stadium, right? Like you played, I mean, all of their big games so far have been away from home. Mm-hmm. Florida State was away from home. Mizzou was away from home. You had Ole Miss on the road. Mississippi State, when Jaden Daniels went off, that was on the road. So now you get to kind of come home. I think that like that is going to be a raucous environment. Here's the other thing too, is like 6 of the last 7 games in this series have been decided by 5 or less points, which is like really, really good. Very, very close. I think it's a pretty evenly matched series all the way around. LSU has dominated Auburn at home. That last win when Bo Nix had his crazy, I'm not going to call it a Heisman moment, but you know what I mean, where he's running all over the field. That was a 24-19 win against a pretty bad LSU team. And it's the first time they had beaten LSU in Death Valley since like Y2K. I think it was like since the first time it's like 1999. So like I think also my groceries are about to get dropped off, so the dogs are going to go crazy. Sorry in advance. But I think that no one is going to stop this LSU offense besides themselves. Anybody that includes if they play Bama or Georgia or like in Atlanta, whatever. And they do play Bama obviously in Tuscaloosa, but like Peyton Thorne sucks. Like he's very, very bad. Like he's a very bad quarterback. I think that if you're Auburn, what you're looking for is in the bye week, did we work on timing routes? Did we work on passing? Did we work on getting more comfortable with the quarterback situation and their receivers? Because the issue is not like, it's not even necessarily with how bad the quarterbacks have been or like the lack of like the offensive line. The offensive line hasn't been that bad. You have 2 really good running backs. They are just not on the same page, anywhere close to being on the same page as those receivers and tight ends. So hopefully that's improved for them. I think they get boat raced. Mm-hmm.
Finally, Chris, in the SEC Week 7 slate, Bama, Arkansas, any concerns? That series has been kind of fun over the years, but I mean, Bama's a 20-point favorite now in this game. I question, Arkansas and the buy-in and keeping this thing together. Obviously, they've lost 4 in a row, I think it is.
I think so.
And now you got to go to Tuscaloosa. Thoughts on this game? I mean, do you think it should be a pretty easy Saturday walk in the park for Bama, or could you see this one getting kind of interesting?
I think it'll be interesting. I really do. I think what is like the definition of a trap game, right? Like Bama's coming off a really big game in College Station where they had a hard-fought win. Next week they get Tennessee at home, and that's been circled because of all the shit talk from last year and the way they stormed the field and took the goalpost down to the river and all that kind of stuff. And in between is little Arkansas, who you've beaten for 16 straight years. You're a 20-point favorite. You feel like you got it all figured out now because all you got to do is start getting the run game going, whatever. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. Like, I don't think that Arkansas beats Bama because I haven't seen that since like before the iPod was or the the iPhone was invented or Twitter. But at the same time, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be, especially in the first half or so, because like KJ Jefferson is still one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Rocket Sanders is a good running back, and this defense has given up some big plays at times. They've been really, really good over the past couple of weeks, and I think that they should win this game. But man, an 11 a.m. start coming off a huge win in College Station with Tennessee coming in next week, like that is the absolute epitome of a trap game. So I think I'm not going to bet on this because I'm an upstanding, morally sound person now, and I'm not going to wager any money on this game. But if I was, I would hammer Arkansas.
Chris, final thing before I get you out of here. Take that you had over the summer or in the preseason that you look at now and is just say the most inaccurate, most wrong, like just the thing that has gone against the grain the most that you thought like, I got this figured out, that as we sit at the halfway point, you were like, somehow I totally missed on this.
None, because I've been right about everything and usually am. No,
so, I mean, your gambling picks are perfect. So you're 100% on gambling right now.
Dude, I'm at 72, which is pretty fucking good.
Cash out, Marler, cash out.
33-10 over the last 3 weeks. Just throwing that out there.
Wow.
Yeah. So Prize Picks is one of y'all's guys. If you want to make some money, follow Big Picks Energy every Friday and Saturday on my Twitter at Vern Funquist. But I will also say this: the one thing I've missed on more than anything, because I feel like I've been pretty good with my picks, but I really didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be able to stack seasons like this. And not only has he been able to do that, he has been. I mean, Jaden Daniels had 17 touchdown passes last year. That was it. 17-3 and 28 total and 3 interceptions. He has been tremendous this year. He's in my opinion the best player in the country right now. I don't know if he gets to New York. I don't know if he wins the Heisman or whatever, but like right now, he's been incredible to watch, and I owe that man a big apology because I was way off on that.
Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored. Chris, it's always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate you taking the time. We'll do it again next week, my dude.
Sounds good, brother.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Great stuff from Chris Marler. Always a blast chatting with him. Yeah, so always a good time. Really, really appreciate that. Some really good insight on the SEC games this weekend. And I don't know, I took Auburn plus 11. I hope it's not a boat race, but it might be. Who knows? It might be. It might be. Guys, that being said, unless we have any questions that are outstanding, and it doesn't look like we do, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Guys, do not forget, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live. We drop new video content as well. Also, hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Podcasts dropping daily at 5 p.m. Eastern time. You can check us out there. And, of course, guys, stay tuned to social media. All the content there, content bleeding out of the eyeballs. We're live noon to 2 the rest of the week. And like I mentioned, guys, there's a good chance one day for sure, maybe tomorrow and Friday, we go longer than 2 o'clock until about 3 or so to get in a couple conversations, interviews, some content we've created. Get those in on the airwaves. So you can look forward to that, guys. Content is bleeding out of the eyeballs over the next couple of days as we continue to count down the days until Gamecocks and Gators Saturday at Willie B, as well as the rest of the Week 7 slate. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.